Okay, welcome to everyone here. I'm Patty Stolier from Age Friendly Corte Madera. Today is June 22nd, 2022, and this is the Age Friendly Marin Forum. If you're not familiar with the worldwide Age Friendly movement, you can find that on the Aging Impact Initiative, and I'll put the link to that into the chat. Several leaders from the age-friendly communities in Marin get together each month and brainstorm ideas for topics that we hope will be helpful for older adults. So if you have an idea for a chat talk, please put that into the post too. Okay, today's topic is cannabis right for me? And we are very fortunate to have an expert to offer us excellent advice. Catherine Goldberg was born in Miami. After attending Sarah Lawrence College in New York, she moved to San Francisco to start her first company, Brain Buzz. Now she's the owner of WeedBar LA, and she focuses on non-smoking alternatives. She provides effective tools and protocols that are easy for any adult to implement. She's been featured in High Times Magazine, Fortune, and the Jewish Journal. And I noticed in the places that Kat has lived, she has gone to the corners of the country. So I think you need to move to the Pacific Northwest is the only one you're missing.
It's cold. It's cold and dark.
That's true. Cold and dark is true. Okay, we will, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. And at the end, we will cover those. And I will hand it over to you, Kat.
Patty, before we do that, could we please ask people to mute themselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. Please mute yourself because you don't need to say anything. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat.
Good to go.
Actually, could the host mute everyone? Because not everybody mutes themselves.
I'll try and do it now. In case somebody can't unmute, if you're on an iPad or something and you're not sure how, just put it in the chat and I can unmute you when you want to talk.
Okay, Kat.
Fabulous. Cool. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Kat Goldberg. Thank you for having me. I'm beyond honored to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I want to tell you guys, first of all, how cannabis can help improve your quality of life. Honestly, I think that's sort of like the boring part. There are so many other things you can be doing in your life that also improve your quality of life, that when it's paired with cannabis, that's really when the healing and the magic start. So I kind of want to take a holistic approach, and there seems to be some sort of emergency alert. Hold on, sorry. Amber alert. Okay, hopefully that child's okay. Okay, so as Patty said, my first company, Brain Buzz, we did marketing for cannabis brands. So the first client I had was a coffee cannabis company, and I sent them an email and said, like, coffee and cannabis are my two favorite things. You know, there's nothing I love more than powering through the day and having the benefit of cannabis and coffee to propel me. And they hired me to do their marketing. And it was the first time I was able to hear these stories about how cannabis was really able to help people live their lives again. You know, people that were homebound or bedridden or just in pain, how quickly it improved their quality of life. So I knew there was something really special to that. It significantly helped me as well. I grew up with a Jewish anxiety, and it was always a little bit difficult for me to eat. And when you don't have like the nutrition, nothing else really works. So I started using cannabis when I was 18 to promote my appetite. And everything really changed after that. I was able to get into meditation, which is something I do daily, have done for a decade. And it was just the beginning of seeing that, you know, there's a lot of suffering in the world, and there's an ability to reduce that suffering by a tiny bit. I can't reduce it by a lot, but an eyedropper full I can do. So that's what I want to share with you guys today. And then, oh, WeedBar is fabulous. So we bring the WeedBar to weddings and birthday parties. So when people like a regular bar, but the love that and laughter and gratitude that come out of these weddings is remarkable. I don't drink alcohol. I don't really have a problem with alcohol, but it's a very different vibe, as you can imagine. So being able to do WeedBar, I can share cannabis with people who normally wouldn't visit a dispensary or know anything about it, especially kind of like the grandparents and the older people and stuff like that. So basically, first of all, let's see. So this is about aging, right? So you have a chronological age, which is your age, that's set. You can't move that. And then you have your biological age, which is actually malleable. And there are certain things you can do to lower your biological age. And the 3 pillars that I like to think about are really sleep, pain management, and stress. Because if even one of those is off, your quality of life is not going to be as good as it can be. And one second. So with cannabis, I think people also have this Cheech and Chong notion of hotboxing up a car. I've never seen Cheech and Chong. I'm not really sure exactly, but I know they're famous. So cannabis technology has really come a long way. There are drinks now. There are mints. My personal favorite is a cannabis pain lotion that you just put on whatever hurts. And Patty can tell you that it works, thank God. They're basically with cannabis, you just need to ask the question of like, how do you want to feel and what is your consumption method? So you may say, well, I want my pain to be reduced, but I want to be clear-headed and I want to be able to drive and go about my day and work. Or you might say, I'm using it at the very end of the day for sleep. It's okay if it knocks me out or if it's a little bit psychoactive. So finding that right product for you is really kind of the fun and exciting part. People talk about how strong cannabis has gotten, and that's absolutely true. But they have also gone in the other direction with microdosing. So a lot of the drinks and mints and gummies and things like that are all below the regular dose at 2.5 milligrams. So when I give those out at weddings, I say it's not psychoactive. You're going to feel a little bit better, but no one's going to be high or impaired or tripping out or anything like that. You'll really you'll have your sense about you. So with those 3 pillars of health, sleep, I'd say, is sort of the foundation, because if you're not getting good quality and enough quantity of sleep, nothing else in your brain or body is going to work right. So, and cannabis has been used to help people sleep for thousands and thousands of years. The Chinese cultivated cannabis as an herbal remedy. The Greeks and Romans used it. It's mentioned in the Torah as an ingredient in the anointing oil or the Bible, the first part of it. So cannabis has been used to help people for many, many, many years. With sleep, has everyone heard? So there's THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient in cannabis. There's CBD, which gets a lot of play nowadays. That's non-psychoactive, that helps with sleep. And there is a new compound that was recently discovered called CBN that specifically promotes sleep. And a couple great companies, Kiva, for example, have figured this out. They, through really cool science, they put the plant through a machine and extract the different cannabinoids. And so they can basically make products that have a certain effect, which is really cool. So there are a lot of products that promote sleep, and that's going to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep. The cannabis will help, and I think that's interesting. Something that I found that personally really helps with sleep, and this is sort of my holistic approach, that it's not just the cannabis you take, it's what else you do, which I think is helpful, is mouth breathing is not good. So we all pretty much breathe through our mouths pretty normally, and that triggers our fight or flight response. And what you don't really notice is that usually when you're sleeping with your mouth open. So there is I don't want to call it a trend, but there are people, including myself in the health community, who every night take a little piece of medical tape and put it on our lips and get to sleep. And the amount of energy I have in the morning compared to before it's night and day. It's absolute night and day. Normally, you wake up kind of feeling fatigued and not refreshed, and especially with cannabis, it can make you a little bit drowsy in the morning for some people. So this idea of modifying your behavior to go along with it is also really helpful. Should I be looking at the questions, or no? Okay, you'll tell me in a second. Okay, these are really good questions. Okay, great. Okay, cool. And then one last point on sleep is that if you have trouble getting to sleep, staying asleep, something that works really well is to imagine you're replaying your day in your head. So as if you were watching a movie of your day, but in fast forward. And you go through waking up, you go through brushing your teeth, taking out the dog, you go through everything, just a couple seconds here and there. And then you imagine releasing it and you go to sleep. And the combination of those three things, I think, is pure magic. Okay, pain management. Something that I think is interesting about pain, I'm going to share with you, and you can kind of take it as you will. There was a study done with these burn victims, children, burn victims, pretty much forced. And they were asked to rate their pain while their bandages were being changed. And it was excruciating. And then they did an experiment where they had them play a game in virtual reality. And it was a game where it was snowing and they were throwing snowballs and building snowmen, and they were asked to rate their pain. And it was manageable. It was just annoying. So it went from excruciating to annoying based on their attention. So we're really talking about the perception of pain. Cannabis reduces pain because it reduces inflammation. That's really kind of like the quick Cliff Note version of why cannabis helps so many different ailments, is because most of the ailments are caused by inflammation, and by reducing inflammation, we automatically feel better. But it's this idea of, really saying, what is our mindset about the pain? Is there a way we can distract ourselves so that we suffer less? And what I was mentioning to Patty before is that my all-time favorite product is this cannabis pain lotion. And I'm sure everyone has seen those CBD lotions in stores or on the internet, CBD pain lotions. Unfortunately, they don't work. For the lotion to be activated, it has to have a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD. The ratio is really, really important. And there are a couple brands who make this lotion, and it works wonders. I got it for a neighbor who actually had back surgery. And I said, it'll help. And I got a letter from his wife 2 weeks later saying that you saved his life. And I said, I didn't do anything. God makes cannabis. I'm happy to get it for you. But it's fantastic that even with injuries as severe as back surgery, this lotion actually makes a difference. And then the last factor of my 3 pillars is stress, which again, I'd like to bring up kind of like the mindset factor, that it's not, no one's eliminating stress. The world is stressful, but it's about how you respond to the stress, and how you can get that time between the stressor and your baseline, how you can get that to be a shorter amount of time. So cannabis helps reduce stress because basically it helps shrink the ego. It quiets the default mode network in our brain that basically gives us a sense that is the I story that we tell ourselves. So when you use cannabis, that internal voice is quieted down, and that is what reduces the stress. So I hope, does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay, so basically also before we get into the cannabis solution, because obviously cannabis helps with stress, is that it's the amount of positive to negative experiences you have in one day that actually determines your quality of life. It determines your vagal tone, which is a nerve that runs from your brain to your gut, and it can be influenced. So the idea is that if you can curate your day, like obviously negative things are going to happen. You know, you drive, people are cut you off, whatever. Can you take some time to curate your day with things that make you feel good, things that make you feel awe, things that make you feel wonder? And if you've used cannabis before, you'll know that things are pretty amazing after you smoke. I mean, little things are beautiful. It's a whole new way of kind of moving through the world. So it's a combination of the biological factors and the mechanisms that help people sleep better, be in less pain, and reduce their stress. But it's also like the behavioral modifications that you make in addition that makes them long lasting and powerful. So that's my spiel. And I know I saw like a lot of really good questions come in. So can someone like read them to me and then I'll answer, or is that a good method?
Patty, are you going to take that on?
That is perfect. I will take that
Okay.
on.
Thank you, Catherine.
Did that make sense? Was that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you. Thank
These questions are coming up because I think people want just a bit more. So,
you.
yeah.
Okay, so first question. I'm interested in how to use cannabis for anxiety. Would like mostly CBD and as little THC as possible. I've been told some THC is necessary in order to facilitate the CBD. So you talked about it in the transdermal, but you didn't talk about the proportion for which he's asking for anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. So anxiety, basically you want to keep the THC as low as possible because for some people, THC can actually cause anxiety. It increases your heart rate, which makes you a little bit anxious. For anxiety, there's a drink that is, it's 2 milligrams of THC and 4 milligrams of CBD. And that is a fantastic combination because you don't get high or stoned, but you feel better. We give them away at weddings and people will come back an hour later saying, I don't feel anything, but I feel great. And that's what you want. So that product is called Can, comes in a little can. By the way, I have a discount codes for delivery services that carry all these products. So I can put that in the chat. If you want to try any of them, you'll get $30 off. If you don't want to drink something for anxiety, then the mints, the Kiva mints, which are 2.5 milligrams of THC, they don't have any CBD, so it's not as balanced, but that if you feel that the can isn't reducing your anxiety to the level that you want it to be reduced, I would suggest having a mint on top of it, and that should take care of you.
Could you spell the name of the beverage?
Yes, CANN.
Thank you.
They're absolutely delicious. There's no sugar added. It's a great product.
Gluten-free. Okay, let's see. Please speak to the quality of sleep one gets. Does one go through the usual sleep cycles using cannabis?
Okay, so there is some debate that cannabis disrupts REM sleep. That is being studied initially, but there aren't really conclusive results around it. There's actually some evidence that suggests that the reparative part of sleep happens right before REM sleep, and cannabis does not influence that. So it really is sort of like a personal, you have to try it out and see what works for you. people report that when they use cannabis, they stop remembering their dreams. And that's an indication of their REM cycle being, you know, broken up.
Sorry.
But in terms of people, when I give these sleep products, the CBN specifically to clients, you know, they say I slept like a baby for the first time. So you really kind of have to balance out the risks versus rewards. But if you're not sleeping at all, and then all of a sudden you start getting some quality, good sleep, you're going to start to feel better.
Catherine, before we move on to the next question, I had two that relate to what you've just said. So going back, well, let's start with the sleep. So somebody might be taking melatonin to try and as a sleep aid. I guess, would you advise that you stick to one sleep aid?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're willing to experiment, I would stop the melatonin supplement and I would introduce a cannabis supplement and I would see if that works better. I wouldn't mix them together because we don't know about the interactions. Mm-hmm. By the way, no one has ever died from cannabis, ever. So that should give you a little bit of security, but for the sake of knowing if it's the melatonin that's working or the cannabis working, they should be isolated.
And then going back to the drink, the pain drink or stress drink, you said it had 2 milligrams of THC, the can, but I guess the question that many would ask you and probably do when you're at an event is, do you start slow? Like, would I drink part of this can and wait X number of minutes? So explain the process of adaptation and experimentation for ourselves. How do we go about that in a safe way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, so I feel like everyone has a horror story when it comes to edibles and cannabis. You know, you don't think it's working and you take more and then all of a sudden it's not good. Can is specifically designed where you can drink the entire beverage and be okay. So it's the 2 milligrams of THC, but it's the 4 milligrams of CBD that balance it out. So the THC is sort of like a gas pedal and the CBD is like a brake. So that's how it's balanced out. If you're gonna have like a smoking alternative, I would suggest having, you know, 1 puff of a joint and putting it out. There's absolutely no reason why you would need 3 or 4 or 5 puffs starting out. With some of the sleep products that I mentioned, the CBN, those are a little bit stronger in terms of THC content because THC helps you sleep. So what I do with like the gummies or the chocolates is that I cut them in half. So it's 5 milligrams and I do 2.5. And then you wait an hour and a half, and then you see how you feel and you can always take another one. But keep in mind that everyone's metabolism is different and it depends on what you've eaten that day. So give it a solid hour and 15 minutes before you decide if it's working or not, or if you want to take more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another question about using it for sleep. So any other questions that you have that come up about sleep, post them in there if we haven't already addressed it. Okay, I heard the THCV can help with weight loss. Any information on that? So, you know, cannabis is known for the munchies, and this is like the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's diet weed. I heard the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills were trying to patent one of the strains and literally call it diet weed. So it's super interesting. So yes, so THC stimulates appetite. CBD, not so much. There are over 100 other cannabinoids, little parts of the cannabis plants that do various things. So THCV actually suppresses appetite in a very powerful way. There are certain strains that are high in THCV, and it's not most of them. The one that's readily accessible is called Durban Poison. Maybe not the best name, but it's someone should really rebrand that. But it's
the Real Housewives.
yeah. So and that, by the way, so the THCV comes in either flower where you can have a joint, or it comes in a vape cartridge where you can have a little hit. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't think the vape cartridges are the best way to go about consuming cannabis. I think it's better to eat or drink it or smoke it, as people have been doing for thousands of years. The idea of using these vape cartridges, the benefit is that there's no smell. So sometimes you find that you want a certain strain and it's only available in the vape cartridge. I can give you guys links for the other cannabis that's like the diet one. So basically, but there are no edible products that are high in THCV. So you really, you have the flower, you have one joint, you take 1 or 2 puffs earlier in the day, and you will honestly have no appetite. So if, for example, you're using cannabis to increase your appetite, this is not the strain for you.
Right. Now, you said that your preference is to recommend people drink it or eat it, but that's hard to gauge, like what Sarah was asking, do I drink half the can of can? Because it takes a while for it to go through your body and affect you. So that's sort of the advantage of smoking it, is that right away.
Yeah, it's instant. Yeah, I mean, if you have a can, you can drink a whole can and you're gonna be okay. You can have 1 kiva mint and you're gonna be okay. I wouldn't start adding on to that. That's all. And personally, I prefer smoking because smoking stimulates your appetite in a way that edibles and drinks do not. So if that's your intention, then, having a puff of a joint and then putting it out is a really good method.
Okie doke. Okay, another question. Can cannabis products, small amounts of THC and CBD be used with gabapentin?
That's something I'm not a doctor. That is something that I would suggest asking your doctor.
And that was my question, is who do you go to for counsel? Because the MDs aren't trained in it. The pharmacist, is the pharmacist the person to ask about those kinds of drug interactions?
It's a hard one. I mean, there are health educators out there, I guess, like us, that try to spread the word about cannabis. Some doctors get it. Some doctors, they're like, of course you're going to use cannabis. It's going to help your quality of life. Other doctors don't get it. And it's really kind of a hit or miss. So it's a combination between talking to your doctor, but then also talking to your friends and relatives who may also use cannabis, and to see who they're talking to. There are lots of groups, even online, cannabis groups run by amateurs, but where you can ask certain questions and maybe do a little detective work and go and find an answer. Just note that the research hasn't been done, so there's not going to be conclusive evidence either way. Okay,
and Sarah did a lot of research and put together a resource list. So Sarah, if you put that into the chat, that would be great. And then people can get some more information.
Yeah, and it wasn't just me. Our hearing that we were having this forum, our Dr. Lisa Santora in our public health office in the county who's very supportive of this forum, just wanted to provide the research that is out there on cannabis. So that's what will be in the reference link that I provide, or in the references, and it's additional information. I do have a question about, Catherine, I've heard of individuals using cannabis for pain management, back pain, other types, sciatica. But I've always wondered if for long-term use to control pain, which thankfully it works very well for many individuals, do our bodies build up a resistance to the effects? And so maybe one might want to consider at what point one would start using it for pain management, knowing it might taper off in its effectiveness over time.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. So you do build up tolerance to cannabis fairly quickly. So that 2.5 mint that really helped you out yesterday, you might find yourself taking 2 the next day. It's something to be aware of, especially if you have any sort of addictive personality. Anything that makes you feel better, that increases dopamine, has the potential to be addictive. Cannabis is no different. Okay, so for long-term pain, that's a really good question. So to treat long-term pain, chronic pain isn't going anywhere, right? Like the chronic pain is going to be there. It's up to you to somehow change your mindset and your relationship to the chronic pain, because that's the only thing you're in control of. So I would suggest there are mindfulness-based classes in Marin and Oakland and in the Bay Area that are specifically for chronic pain, and they teach methods, and it's something that you have to do every day. A lot of cannabis users who are using it for chronic pain, are using it sort of as a daily supplement. So it's something that you use every day. It's not always increasing the amount. Sometimes you'll have a mint, sometimes you'll have a puff, depending on where your pain level is. But cannabis can only go so far with chronic pain. So it really, you really need to take a second action for dealing with that as well.
Sarah and Kat, I used to work in a neurology office, and transcutaneous nerve stimulator is a perfect thing for ongoing pain, because the way that it works is the pain pathway can only focus on one pain at a time. And if it's focusing on the little triggery stimulation of the superficial skin, it can't focus on the deeper nerve that's trying to get to the brain to say, ow, my back still hurts. So transcutaneous nerve stimulator might be a good thing to use along with some kind of low level of cannabis.
Also, just as an experiment that you can, perform on yourself, you can rate your level of pain, and then you can go ahead and do something that takes up 100% of your attention and visual energy, like playing a game of Tetris, and you can rate your pain after and see if there's any sort of difference. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that we are in more control of our pain than we think, and proving that to yourself is a really good start.
Diana, did you want to say something about that specifically?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there is a physician, Rachel Zoffness, who was not a physician, an MS and a PhD, who wrote the pain management workbook, and it's available on Zoom, on Amazon. And really very, very helpful she specializes in chronic pain and illness. And she talks about, let's see, I just want to talk a little bit about the book. Anyway, it's a really useful tool if you have chronic pain or chronic illness, to work through the I don't want to say psychological, but what pain is, where it actually lives, what you can do about it, and how you can live with it better. So it's called the Pain Management Workbook.
Thank you. We understand so little about the mind-body connection in terms of many things, but definitely about pain. Can you give a personal example of the reduction of stress and what you use to reduce the stressful reaction? It might help us to better understand the changes that occur.
Yeah, so first of all, when I'm feeling stress, it's because of the story I'm telling myself, that something terrible is happening, that I have no control over it, and that it's probably a life or death situation. Cannabis allows you to shift your perspective. It allows you to take a step back and see things kind of from like a bird's eye view. And you notice that it's really not as much of a burden as you think it is. It doesn't mean anything is eliminated by any means, but you're able to approach the stress with a slightly different mindset and attitude that actually reduces it. So, and then personally, if I'm stressed, if I have one puff of a joint, that's going to be enough. It's going to be enough to toggle my perspective, to feel myself sitting in the chair, to come into my body. Because first of all, when you're experiencing present moment awareness, there is no stress. The stress is either in the future or the past. So cannabis allows you to come into the present moment. And during that time, the stress is eliminated. Then you go back to the voice in your head and everything is horrible. And then you come back to the feeling of your body in the chair. So it's those things working in conjunction that really help with the stress. And honestly, one puff is enough. For example, even with my appetite, when I'm using cannabis so I can eat, it's 1 or 2 puffs and I just have an appetite. It's a profound difference.
Excellent.
Patty, my experience has been it changes my perspective. You know, I'm so caught up in what I think is going on, and I don't have the experience of being hungry. It doesn't actually has the opposite effect for me. It dampens my appetite, but the real value for me is changing perspective and seeing things in a different way. Years ago and today again, lots of meetings, and you can't necessarily process everything that's going on, but you can use I guess we'll call it CBD, and I can actually replay the meeting in my mind and actually get a variety of different perspectives. And I can do that for a number of things that happen in my life. It's an incredibly useful tool.
And this is a quieting of the default mode network, which is where the ego comes from in the brain. That cannabis reduces that noise, and that's why we're able to see these different perspectives.
We have a couple of questions related to physical medical issues, and I think we need to address those. Bridget says there's a study out this week that mentions cannabis can be linked with heart rhythm issues in older adults via it was in the American Journal of Cardiology. So what do you know about heart rhythm issues? You mentioned that THC tends to elevate heart rate. So how do you determine, I assume you determine THC dose in whatever product you're using for whatever reason, you start slow with very low amounts to avoid that from happening. But ultimately we have to consult with our physicians if we are having already heart issues, blood pressure issues. We should, I assume you would suggest we always talk to our physicians about our use and its effects. And
of course, and if you're someone with a heart problem, cannabis may not be the plant for you, and that's okay. There are other plants out there that can help. Yeah, and just something to note, especially with older people, is that cannabis can drop your blood pressure quite quickly. So if you are consuming cannabis, smoking, and you're sitting down, be extremely careful getting up, because sometimes you can get dizzy. And I've seen it happen before, and it's a little bit scary. But if it's something that you know of and you're conscious of it, then you'll be okay. But if you have any sort of heart issue, blood pressure issue, things that control every part of your body, you need to ask a physician about it, and be prepared that the physician could go either way with cannabis.
We have a few people asking about product names, both for the transdermal topical painkiller and for products for sleep and pain. So I don't know how you want to, it's a gigantic portfolio of products. I don't know if you want to give some examples or
Yeah,
put your contact information in the chat so people can contact you, or what's going to work best.
I'll tell you about the products. If you would like to have a direct link with $30 off to the product, send me an email at CAT@WeedBar, WeedBar.LA.com. We'll put that in the chat. And I will find the appropriate product for you and send you the link, first of all, because not every product works for every person, and that's important. The lotion that I use, the brand doesn't matter as long as it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So I believe Ease, which is available in NorCal, they carry like Mary's Medicinal. I think that's what the brand is called.
Yep.
And that's a 1-to-1. The brand in Southern California is called Apothecana, and that's also a 1-to-1. You'll see there's a brand called Papa and Barclays that's really popular. It works for some people. They do not believe in the 1-to-1 ratio, so I don't recommend that. And you'll also see in the pain section of any like cannabis dispensary website that there are patches. The patches can help, but they're single use and they're very expensive. And I think the lotion works better. And then for the sleep products, those are the CBN products. So Kiva makes specific mints that are high. They're called it's called like good night mints or something. They also make gummies that are in like a dark purple case. The gummies I would cut in half because they're 5 milligrams. And that's pretty solid for sleep. Also, honestly, if you have one puff of weed, the fact that your stress is kind of melting away and your pain is melting away, it's going to help you sleep. I think that's something people realize, is that the first time they smoke, they sleep really, really, really well. So it's fabulous that there are products specifically that promote sleep, but in fact, almost all cannabis, except for the diet weed, will help you sleep.
Kat, we just messed up the whole thing. It says cat@weedbarla.com and cat@weedbar.com. So they can't both be right.
Oh, at WeedBarLA.com.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
One person is asking whether inflammation effectiveness also decreases with use over time. I'm assuming it does. If pain reduction, after a long period of use may decrease, if the effectiveness may decrease, I'm assuming that also means inflammation does too.
Yeah, and like all supplements, it's a supplement. So it's not something that you're necessarily taking every single day for the same exact reason. So taking a couple of days off can really kind of reset that. But yeah, you will build up a tolerance, and what helps your pain one day may not be enough to help your pain the next day, which is why these behavioral based tools are just as important as the plant, in my opinion.
And somebody posted another book for chronic pain, The Way Out by Alan Gordon. And the pain management workbook that Diana recommended is in the chat. Is the change in mindset that you're describing with cannabis, which alleviates stress, achievable with mostly CBD, or does this come mostly from the THC?
I mean, it comes from your mindset. It has nothing to do with the plant. This is this is classic cognitive behavioral therapy. You learn to reframe things in your head. I think for me, I was only open to learning that once I had been smoking for a little bit, because it really did kind of change my perspective and show me that there was another way to live. But they're separate things. And keep in mind that the CBD is only going to work if there's a little bit of THC. So, and belief effects are real. Belief effects have been measured in a lot of scientific studies. So I'm not going to rule that out entirely. But it's a combination between training your brain when you're not using cannabis, and then using the cannabis when the stimulus occurs, when you're in pain, and then bringing them together.
Do you have a short bibliography that or books that we could?
Yeah. Of course. Just email me. And
Okay.
And you guys are near Spirit Rock up in Marin.
Right.
I would highly suggest doing a day there if possible. That'll just like totally change your life. But yeah, I'm very interested in the intersection between philosophy and neuroscience.
Yeah.
So this idea of like why we are the way we are, how we feel the way we do, and what that has to do with the brain and how to modify it. So meditation is the thing. Mindfulness meditation specifically is what has been studied in labs with brain scans. And going back to that chronological age versus biological age, it's the people have been meditating for 20, 30, 40 years that their brains are younger than the people who haven't been. So those are the studies that have been done, which I'm happy to link to. And if anyone wants like a private meditation session, I can teach you how to meditate. It's something everyone should know how to do. You shouldn't have to like, it should be accessible. So I'm more than happy to send you the books I've read, and I can also send you the scripts that I've written that I use for myself.
You address the bad rap that cannabis gets.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was illegal for a really long time. The reasons why it was illegal had nothing to do with the health benefits. It had a lot to do with the money that was being made from the hemp. And politics have always existed. And a lot of money and time and energy and years were spent promoting an image that wasn't accurate about cannabis. And it stuck. And now I feel like my generation's job to show people that it's not what you think it is. It's not people being lazy, sleeping on the couch all day. It's in fact, using it to make a difference, to exercise, to meditate, to help people, to go do charity. It's the catalyst that allows those things to happen. And of course, anything can be used in a negative way. You could just sleep all day, but you can also choose not to.
I have a question. You said often you'll bring it to a wedding. Well, I assume there's alcohol at weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff. So what about using both? Do you tell people pick one or the other? What's the deal?
We ask people to pick one or the other. We understand that they're probably going to have a glass of wine, a sip of something. But if we see that they're intoxicated, then they will not be served. There's also the rule about if you have, I'm like a little bit dyslexic, so let me make sure I get this right. But if you drink alcohol and then you smoke, you will throw up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you get really dizzy. It's terrible. It only takes one time of knowing that one. And then if you smoke cannabis and then you have a beer or glass of wine, you will not get sick. However, there's a reason weed vodka is not sold in stores. It's illegal to manufacture cannabis and alcohol together. So please be mindful. I tell people to choose one or the other. If you're thinking about reducing stress and you try a glass of red wine, fabulous, try a glass of red wine, but the next time isolate the variable and try the cannabis.
Thanks.
Like, yeah, I think it's also that the people who visit the WeedBar at weddings, we're not drinkers. So a lot of us just we're not visiting the bar in the first place. There's a little bit of like a divide, I think, between the people who want to consume alcohol at a wedding and the people who want to consume cannabis at a wedding, sort of like philosophically speaking. So there really isn't that much interconnectedness. We do infused dinners, and clients have asked if we can do cocktails with cannabis, and that's a hard no. We'll only do mocktails, and I don't think there are any health benefits personally of alcohol, so it's not something that I want to mix into my health regimen.
So yeah, I think most of the time the people that are using alcohol in a social situation could benefit from the WeedBar instead more. So if they're open to it.
That's a good segue into, the conversation that if a person has addictive behaviors anyway, they have to be very careful about using cannabis because there is a cannabis use disorder now, defined as a mental health disorder. And so, people with addiction syndromes have to can have addiction to cannabis as well.
And you want to make sure you want to
go ahead, Catherine.
Replacing whatever your addiction is with
Right.
cannabis, because then it's going to start the cycle all over again. People don't talk about, thank God this like affliction has kind of come to light, because for a long time people said it's absolutely not addictive, but that's not true. Exercise is addictive. Food is addictive. Addiction is a process in our brain. So to say that, cannabis, feeling anything that allows you to feel better has the potential to become addictive, and cannabis is no different. However, if you're not going to overdose on cannabis.
I'm fascinated by you mentioned, Catherine, the government's restrictive research on focusing a lot on the negative effects of cannabis more than the benefits. And, the research skews heavily onto what could go wrong with it. But at the same time, we're seeing palliative care and hospice professionals seriously consider cannabis to replace or products to replace opioids at end of life, and for multiple reasons: for the pain, for sleep, for developing appetite.
Yeah, and people want their family members to not be so drugged out if they don't have to be.
Mm-hmm. So as they do more research on that, I guess the challenge there is you have an individual who may not be able to speak to, at a certain point, to their levels of pain or to the effects that they're feeling. And it's sort of a provider's guess as to whether the dose is working effectively for them or not. And maybe therein lies the challenge, right? Because you don't have the same kind of feedback always coming your way.
Right.
But I see that maybe a potential future barrier, and maybe it's been a barrier too, are the pharmaceutical companies that make the opioids, that make pain meds and other, pharmaceuticals available via prescription. I could see that they might also want to create more barriers and more stops to the growth of this industry and the education and use of cannabis moving forward. Have you seen or heard anything like that?
Yeah, so just to get back to your first point, so first of all, the US is very backwards when it comes to this. Israel is very progressive. The THC, the molecule, the psychoactive molecule, was discovered in Israel in the 80s. And since then, it has been used in nursing homes all over the state. It's used with children that are nonverbal. It's used for people with Crohn's disease. But so there was a long-term study done, I think it was at least 10 years, of using it in nursing homes, which measured quality of life and the other medicines taken. And it was quite conclusive that the people who were using cannabis were having their quality of life was improved. In terms of end of life, I read the story about there was someone who was, slipping, they not doing good, couldn't eat, but still conscious. So I guess this person brought in like a pot brownie because like it wasn't like mandated or whatever. And their mom just like came to life and said, I'm starving. Like, can you bring, let's eat. So, you know, they laughed a lot. They had a good meal. And I think that's really the blessing of cannabis. It's frustrating that it comes down to end of life care when it could come down to quality of life care. But if that's what it has to be for now, then okay. And then I'm sorry, was there?
Oh, just the pharmaceutical companies perhaps creating more barriers to this industry growth.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you read the article, the studies that are published that are claiming that cannabis is not good and not helpful. The pharmaceutical companies are funding them.
Follow the money.
Yeah, I mean, the studies cost money. You know, who's giving the money to make the studies? And that's not to say don't trust science, but it's saying have a cautious view. And I can tell you also that in states that have legal cannabis, the opioid rates have dropped 25%, opioid deaths. So they are, you know, anything that takes people away from constantly needing pills is a major threat. And of course, they're going to try to isolate certain cannabinoids and mark them up for prescriptions. And I think that's immoral. But that's why you really have to kind of investigate. It's a combination of reading the literature out there, kind of using yourself as a guinea pig as much as you feel comfortable, and talking to people about how they benefit from cannabis, because the pharmaceutical company, it's not in their best interest to endorse a plant that grows like a weed that helps people live in less pain. That's a bad business model.
Have you visited a grower or growers? I'm curious. We so care about the source of our food and you know what's in the soil, what's being sprayed on it. I assume is there a regulatory body yet, like we have for organic foods, that is responsible for more accountability in the growing side of things?
Yeah, thank God. And it's not where it should be, but that body does exist. So basically, all cannabis that's sold at a licensed dispensary has to be lab tested. The lab test will be shown on the back of the package with a QR code that you can scan, and it's going to tell you where it tested for heavy metals, pesticides, all of the things that they test for. If it's over a certain limit, they're not allowed to sell it. However, a big problem with cannabis in California is that for every one legal dispensary, there are 20 illegal shops, and there are no regulations there. So at those illegal shops, they are spraying Eagle 40, which becomes cyanide once it's heated, onto the plants. They use fertilizer that's used for golf courses to make it greener on the plants, and that's, if you're immunocompromised, that could be a really big problem. So I always tell people, like, you must go to a licensed dispensary. They're going to have their credentials in the window. And it sucks that the tax is 35%, but that's what it is. And it's better than getting something that is literally poison. And there was an investigation done a couple years ago with these people got products from 100 dispensaries in California unlicensed, and they were all unsafe to smoke. And not to scare anyone, but people on the street, for some bizarre reason, are putting fentanyl into the vape cartridges. And people are dying, and they're buying it from their friends. So you must go to a licensed dispensary to buy cannabis, or else it can be very dangerous.
And in Marin, it has to be door delivered because we don't have storefronts.
Even easier. You don't have to leave your house.
In my first visit to a dispensary over in Berkeley years ago, I can't say, having grown up in a very conservative home, I was the nervous wreck. And it was like trying to be 21 all over again. And your friend Mara Gordon, in her TED talk that I put into the reference list, she talks about her first experience of going to a dispensary and not knowing who in the dispensary could give her the advice that she needed to address her symptoms. And I felt the same way. And so can you advise the people on this Zoom as to how can we feel comfortable for the first time walking into a dispensary, if that's our choice of the way to go, so we could talk to someone about what we need and what they have? How do we find that person who really is going to not just wing it, and is there a structure in dispensaries over with staffing that has levels of knowledge, for instance?
It's a good question. So at good dispensaries, the bud tenders will take you under their wing and show you each product as long as you're specific. You say, I don't want to get high, I want to help with pain, I don't want it to smoke it, and I don't want there to be sugar in it. And a good bud tender will be able to point out what there is. There are other bud tenders who are paid for how much they sell. So they're trying to push more products on you. I can tell you, it's like, I felt like a kid going into a candy store when I at the dispensary. I was like, oh my God, this is fabulous. They have everything. So it is a little bit, note that it will be overwhelming. There are hundreds of products. Take it in, but if you do a little research ahead of time in terms of like what the effect is going to be, I want something that helps me sleep, but I don't want to get too high. What can you show me? They know enough about that. And then you can always email me and say, I'm looking for X, like literally every day people just email me, and I find the right product, because it's difficult when there's so many choices and when there's a lot of turnover with people who work in dispensaries. Mm-hmm. So most people who work there use cannabis, not necessarily for pain management or stress, maybe for pleasure, but they know the basics. But if you Google, best cannabis products for sleep, best strains for sleep, best strains for anxiety, there's a lot of literature out there. So at least you can go in with a direction.
Thank you. Is there a difference in a dispensary that calls themselves a medical dispensary versus one that doesn't use that term?
The only difference is how it's taxed. The products are exactly the same. It's 100% same products. It's just that I think there's like 5% less tax or something. Mm-hmm. And then in certain places, medical dispensaries can sell, I think, up to like 1,000 milligrams of THC, when the other like adult use dispensaries, the products are capped at 100 milligrams. And by the way, all the products I've mentioned are 2.5 or 5. So you're going to be okay with 100 milligram max. And then also, I don't think I mentioned this, but there are pills, there are tablets that you can take.
Prescription.
No, not prescription.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the prescription ones that you said the pharmaceutical companies are now trying to.
Oh, yeah, like for seizures and stuff, like so it's the ratio. So the pills will come in a form of 1 milligram of THC to 30 milligrams, of CBD. That's not going to get you high. Some pills are going to come in a ratio of 1 to 1. That's a little bit psychoactive. Some ratios are going to come in 10 to 1. You're going to get high from that. So it really kind of is this question of how do you want to consume it and how do you want to feel? And then from there, we can find the right product.
Shelf life. I wouldn't have no idea what the shelf life is of various products. Do they put that on the containers?
Yeah, so it's a year. That's what they say. Cannabis doesn't expire. It could dry out a little bit, but it's not like eating bad cheese or something. You know, if you have old weed, it's just you might cough a little bit more. But they keep they do that so that old product isn't always on the shelves. And also just be aware of a lot of places have like an outlet section, discounted weed. That stuff is all about to expire. It's like the muffins that are a day old. Okay. So however that's a personal philosophy.
Okay.
Sarah, do you want to repost the information and resource page so that
I sure will.
see that?
Yes.
And also, please put your name in the chat, your email address, if you want to receive the invites for the upcoming talks. We're going to take a month break in July and expect we'll be back in August, I think. And if you have topics that you want to suggest that we do, please put that in the chat. And cat@weedbarla.com if you want to have questions directly for our fabulous speaker.
Or coupons.
Goldberg. Or if you just want to tell her how great she was.
Are there any questions on the call? Yeah, many of you have been very quiet or just using the chat. We're happy to take any questions here at the end.
Good questions,
They
really
were.
good questions. We're the best audience she's ever had.
So are you busy with wedding season?
Every weekend.
Wow.
We got a 40th birthday party tonight, doing an infused dinner with our chef, and then a weekend wedding. And lots in Palm Springs and Joshua Tree. They're a little bit more like hippie dippy-ish down there, but it's catching on in LA as well.
What about Bay Area? Is there a WeedBar SF?
We've done events in the Bay Area, in Sacramento and Oakland. All come up. I used to live in San Francisco in the Mission. I love San Francisco. It's just, there's something about like the LA culture where there's always a party scene and there's always sort of like, we want to show people what's new that they've never seen before. That kind of allows itself to flourish here. But we get requests from the Bay Area all the time. And if it's a fun job, I'll come up. But if it's not, I can recommend someone.
I'm
And
curious,
you
do you
said there's
think
always a party scene in LA. I guess in Northern California, people are just forest bathing and wondering at nature. Go ahead, Sarah.
Actually, Mark has a question.
Great. Hi, guys. I've been quiet listening, and it's been an excellent informational presentation. So for those who don't know who I am, I've started a number of organizations in Marin County, and I've worked really closely, and it's mostly about our youth. And so I know this is meant to be a different age grouping, but I put together a special presentation in 2015 called the Marin 420 Marijuana and Youth Conference, which became a statewide conference. Patrick Kennedy came in, who was excellent. And for those who don't know him, it's the Mental Health Parity Act, basically. And he is part of an organization called SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which is really the entity that's out there nationally trying to work against any misinformation that's out there. So I just want to share a couple of nuggets with you. I've been I've been a member of the Alcohol and Other Drug Advisory Board for the Marin County Board of Supervisors for 3 terms, and I termed out in October. I was chair for 5 of those years. So I know a little bit of what I'm talking about. But bottom line is that our youth, the high load THC items that are out there around our youth, the dabs, wax, vaping units, and the edibles, get our youth into trouble, and it goes to teenage brain development. Their brains are not fully developed yet. The correlator to this is that when you get to the elder brain, we've had members very close to us, dear friends of ours, who accidentally ate something they didn't know that it was infused, or was infused at such a level that they didn't comprehend, and ended up in the hospital over it. So any thoughts on this, Catherine? Because I understand what you say about nobody's died from smoking a joint, but the fact is that I do know of a number of youth suicides that when they went back and did toxicology, the youth had high load THC in their system. They didn't have other drugs present.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really great point. You know, cannabis is only available legally to people who are 21 for a reason. Any illegal use, you know, is not good. It's absolutely not good for the developing brain because of the surging dopamine. It really does rewire a lot of the circuitry that has to do with impulse control and different sort of emotional regulation. And, you know, I'd say it's as dangerous as driving and texting or alcohol or whatever else youth are doing. I do agree that, yeah, a lot of the products are really, really high in THC, and especially at the illegal shops, because that's where they can get away with doing it. So I think, you know, I think I'm not a parent, but I know parents in the industry have to educate their children about why they can't use cannabis until they're an adult. And then, of course, there are exceptions with, you know, people who are autistic who have their kids on cannabis. And now they speak from going from nonverbal to speaking. So it's a case-by-case basis. You know, I only work with clients who are 21 and older. So yeah, it's extremely dangerous for children, that's for sure. But, you know, you have to show your ID to buy it. So if you're getting it on the street, you're risking getting fentanyl as well, and that's an even bigger issue.
Excellent answer. Thank you. And if I could hit one last thing, the impacts on Bambi is another part of grow operations. And a lot of folks don't necessarily know this. On the law enforcement side of things, when they go into a bust where they're doing a bust, actually they consider one of the most dangerous operations that they go to is usually grow operations because the amount of guns, cash, the whole enchilada. And unfortunately, when they went to legalizing recreational use, it created a huge amount of black market. Like you said, every legal dispensary, there's probably about 20 illegal dispensaries or dealers out there pushing their product on the black market. And one odd little twist in this, since you mentioned opioids earlier, is that the cartels down in Mexico, when they demanded that the marijuana growers switch their crop to opioids, they had a big backlash from the farmers because growing poppy and the stickiness of the stuff that comes out of poppy is a lot different for opium than it is for the marijuana plants. But, you know, the actual grow operations and the insecticides used, all this kind of stuff, you got to really know your source. You got to know where your stuff is coming from and make sure it's not clean, make sure it's clean and not loaded with a bunch of stuff. So thanks again for mentioning that earlier.
Of course, and any product that you purchase legally will have a QR code, which you can scan and get the test results. So if it doesn't have a QR code, don't use it.
Great.
Catherine, both of you brought up something that I'm wondering and one of our participants has asked, what about driving impaired after use? Obviously, we're talking about a substance, you know, you got to worry about.
Yeah, so you need to use it multiple times before you determine how it affects you. Assume that you cannot drive if you're using anything that's high in THC. If you're using, for example, the pain lotion, that's absolutely non-psychoactive. You can operate machinery with that. But you have to see. I guess it's similar with alcohol. You know, if you have a half a glass of wine at dinner, you can drive home. But if you have 2 cups, you can't. It's illegal to, and actually, I'm not sure where the law is on that because there's no such thing as like a cannabis breathalyzer. So you really just, you need to be monitoring it yourself and knowing where you are and your tolerance and stuff like that. One thing I can say for sure is don't have an edible and then get in the car, expect, you know, because it's going to kick in 30 minutes or so. That's going to be a problem. So if you're using cannabis, you know, kind of get yourself seated and you're in for the night, unless it's one of these ratios that is not psychoactive, then I think it's worth experimenting with. I know for people who use cannabis on a regular basis, you know, you can have a mint, you can drive, you don't get mad at people who cut you off in traffic. You can have a canned drink, you're not going to be impaired. But once you get into smoking joints, or like Mark said, messing with wax or any of that stuff, then it's going to be very dangerous to operate a vehicle. So I would hope that people are going to kind of be responsible and monitor themselves.
Well, I certainly have learned a lot. It's been just a wonderful experience having you, and I'm so glad we were able to host your talk today. So thank you, thank you.
Thank
It was really very helpful. And again, if you want to be notified about future forums, put your email into the chat. If you want to contact Kat directly, please do that. And any last thoughts from anybody? If anybody knows a good speaker to address that, please put that in the chat, because we're still searching for our speaker. And I'm just very, very grateful to Kat and to everybody who attended. So thank you for coming. Have a wonderful day and be stress-free, and pleasures and happiness and peace and love.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank
you
you.
everyone for coming.